Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. We have on segment three Dr. Ciarmamicoli talking about his book, The Triumph of Diversity. And in the last segment, we were um, giving the example of someone who is a person of color, like myself, who is talking to some person potentially who is a white person or a person that just misunderstands them and is feeling triggered. And from what I can tell from a lot of people of color, they've had a history of being not understood, not listened to. And so when they bring up an issue, it comes with a certain amount of rage, judgment, and blame. So in that example in the third segment, you were sharing like how you should be neutral. So how can you get to a neutral place if you're not really feeling that neutral about it?
I think, well, first of all, it's very understandable that you wouldn't feel neutral about it because people of color and women too have been subject to so much discrimination over time that it's hard not to be angry. But what I say to young people all the time, what's your goal? I want to influence. Okay, if you want to influence people, I can help you. Not because I'm any guru, but I'm just going to teach you how to change brain chemistry. I have to open you up. If I start getting angry with you, I'm going to close you down.
Hmm.
If I close you down, I can't influence you.
Hmm.
If I produce the stress response, the likelihood of me influencing you goes down exponentially.
Hmm.
So ask yourself, do I want to influence people?
Hmm.
Do I want to influence people to change their perspective? Do I want to have an effect on prejudice? If you want to do that, you have to change brain chemistry.
Okay,
If you produce,
I'm going to be a young person. But why
okay,
do I have to put all the burden? Why aren't they doing anything? Why am I always the person that has to change?
you are the person that's been discriminated against. Okay. It's not that that other person doesn't have to do the work, but if you want to lessen discrimination in your life, we have to approach it this way. And guess what? It's not just about changing people's minds about prejudice. It's about anything. It's about resolving conflict with a friend, with a mate, with somebody you love. How do you influence people to hear you? Do you want to be heard in your life?
Wait,
Do you want to be understood?
I'm being this young person. So, not the interviewer.
You
So
just went from being an older white man to being all right. Okay, you you
I
you
wear multiple faces.
you're taking courses in theater. I see that. Okay.
No, I work with clients, so I hear this. All right, so wait, I don't get it. So I'm the person who's being abused and taken advantage of, and yet I'm supposed to be the more understanding one?
I'm saying I'm not saying you're the only person that should be understanding. I'm saying you're going to influence understanding of the other person, of you and your situation. Look, bottom line is if you get angry and defensive and start yelling or accusing, you're going to produce a response that's going to be defensive. And what's going to happen? There'll be two people yelling at each other.
But why am
What
I
good?
always the person who has to do the work? Like the white person, why don't they have to do the work?
Well, I do believe that many white people are doing the work. And I believe that I'm white. I'm talking to you. You don't want prejudice to exist in this world. That little girl who's got her arm around me in the cover of that book is my grandchild. I want her to grow up in a world for prejudice.
Yeah.
Both of those little girls at the top are my grandchildren. I want them to understand the difference in ethnicity and color and not have prejudice. you know, I told a story about my little grandchild, Carmela, who ran over to an Indian girl who's very dark, and they play all together on the beach. And she comes back and says, "What a great aunt she is." She doesn't know anything about prejudice
Mm.
because that's not the way she's being raised by her parents. She's
Hmm.
being raised to be open. So she has this love of life where she goes up to kids and says, "Do you want to play? Do you want to play?" Even older kids. And somehow, I don't know, she gets them to play with her. I think it's because of he's just inviting them in.
Hmm. So how do you move to a place, the desire to retaliate, to flip the role so that I'm in power and you're not, like sit down and be quiet? Because I've seen this actually happen in a lot of nonprofits where all of a sudden everything changes. All of a sudden it was um, all white people who are running the organization. Now it's all people of color who are running the organization. And in that switch, there's kind of like, you be quiet, white man. There's this kind of scenario that, and actually, what's interesting is I've met a lot of younger white men or even older white men that feel just like they don't even have a voice anymore because they're supposed to give voice to other people because their voices, the white men, have been heard enough. So I don't even know what to think of all of this.
I think what happens is we fall into group categorization. You know, white men, Asian women, whatever. No one person represents any group.
Hmm.
You know, it's like I've treated alcoholics for many years, and people say, "Oh, he's an alcoholic." Well, you know what? They're not all alike. They
Yeah.
may end up with the same symptoms, but they're different people. There's a uniqueness. That's why I wrote in the book about interfaith groups, which I love meeting with interfaith groups because they're people of all these different religions, and they really like each other. They learn from each other. You know that you know you have an insight that I don't have from my teaching, from my learning.
Mm.
And the one thing that I noticed about them too is they appreciate the uniqueness. They don't walk up to someone and say, "Hi Jew, hi Muslim, hi Protestant." They see that within any group there's difference. You know, no one person represents all women. No one person represents all Asians. We are unique. Every human being in the world is unique. If you're really paying attention and really listening empathically, you see the difference.
Hmm.
There's no two clones of each other. It doesn't exist. And once you know that, the world opens up because it's a mystery. It's like, who am I going to meet next? It's so different because your perspective is going to be different. Just because you're Asian, does that mean you think the same way as all Asians?
Yeah. I get that. I actually, in defense of young white men, I worry because uh, it's to the point that a white person just feels guilty to exist. Like, I shouldn't even be thinking that way because I'm a white man with a privileged white man with all the blah, 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 blah. So therefore, I should not be thinking this way at all. It's like, it's kind of the flip side of which now other people, like, I don't think that that was intention of any of this to diminish another person, but I'm seeing that as an outcome which I would have never expected, but I do see it as an outcome in several situations where, yeah, how do you get around that? I
You know,
understand it's not categorizing people, but
there's a chapter in the book, CJ, on the Me Too movement,
mhm,
and I wrote at the end, because there's a number of studies that show that men in the corporate world they're very reluctant. They don't even want to manage women because they don't know what to say, and I'm afraid I'm going to offend them. And then I said at the end of that chapter, maybe I'm being naive, you know, but I worked in a hospital for 25 years. Okay, I worked with lots of women, female doctors, nurses, physical therapists, the whole. I don't think it was that complicated to not offend people. I really don't. I didn't think I had to be super careful. Just had to be respectful.
mhm,
You know, I mean, I didn't think it was so complicated.
mm,
And now I hear men telling, "Oh, you got to watch." Well, no, just act civil.
mm.
Just do that.
Yeah,
I
it's
had a
just,
great example of this young girl. Okay, she's a college senior. I don't know if you remember this in the book, but she's doing an internship at a major Fortune 500 company. And there's three of the interns after 6 months, and one's going to get the time job for when they graduate. So the week before they decide, one of the managers comes over and pinches her rear end. Okay.
oh gosh.
And she's in a queue. And she stands up and says, "If you touch me again, I'm going to put you through that wall."
Hmm.
Okay. And she used a few expletives.
Right.
Okay. And everybody heard it. Now, that man didn't know, but she happens to be a third-degree black belt as well. That's irrelevant. I mean, that wasn't what she was trying to do, just in case.
Right.
So she comes into me in therapy and she says, "Not going to get the job." I said, "What do you mean not going to get the job? How do you know?" Manager pinched my rear end. I told him to go to hell and I put him through the wall if he ever did that again. And, you know, everybody heard it. I'm in a queue. There's no way I'm. Next day, she gets a call from the CFO. He wants to meet with her. So she comes in and she says, she sits down and he looks at her and smiles and she says, I know I didn't get the job. He says, no, you did get it. She said, I got the job. Did you hear what happened? He said, we absolutely heard what happened. He's on probation. We don't want people like that in our organization. We want
Hmm.
people like you in our organization.
Hmm.
And
Oh.
she's real smart. She's a psychology minor. She says, can I ask you a question, Mr. So-and-so? She goes, he said, what? She goes, you have daughters, right? He said, yes, I do.
That's brilliant. I love that story for so many reasons. Wow. Yeah, so it's basically standing up. It's standing up for what you believe in, even if it means that you may not get a job, but it's the right thing to do. And in that case, she did get the job because it's the right thing to do.
Yes. Now, if she was a 54-year-old woman, single mom with 3 kids, and she needs that money, it's a lot more difficult, isn't it?
Yeah,
People tolerate a lot more.
yeah,
But over 40% of women in all jobs say that they face discrimination on a weekly basis.
yeah.
But one of the reasons they don't leave is because of that particular reason is that what if I can't find a job? I got 3 kids. I don't have a husband. I don't have another income. How am I going to pay for my rent? How am I going to pay my mortgage? Am I going to take my son out of soccer camp this summer? I mean, all of those things. So when certain people who lead with aggression and fear know that, they're playing on them.
Mm,
They know you're a single mom. They know you got 3 kids. You know you're not going to walk
mm,
away from it.
mhm.
But sometimes your mental health demands that you do.
Right.
And
Because
it's a hard decision.
so here's what I'm taking from that example of, okay, so I actually literally have a client who's a 50-year-old white man who's working in a nonprofit that is led now by all people of color. Every single higher position is now a person of color, of different colors, right? Different kinds of ethnicities, sexualities, etc. And and actually they are leading with depression and fear. And he is like, but he needs a job because he actually has that scenario where he has like two
Yes.
kids. He has to have the income, and in this kind of economy, he has to just like play along. So it's, but at the same time, the organization is about equity. So this is the irony about the whole thing. I think we fundamentally don't understand what equity means.
I love the mission statements of all the corporations,
Yeah.
businesses, because they all sound wonderful. Right?
Yeah. But it's not, I think that like in some ways it's equal for everyone. It's not that the equal for the people of color. Now it's like this whole flip, like, okay, the people of color are in power, so now you get down on your knees. Like, where did this idea come from? This whole, and I think it's going back to what you said, you're not about leading through oppression and fear, but leading through empathy. That's just the fundamental difference.
Yes, and that's why I wrote the previous book, The Soulful Leader, Success with Empathy, Authenticity, and Integrity.
Yeah.
The studies show, multiple studies show, when you lead that way, it's infectious.
Yeah.
People want to come to work. People will work for 10 to 15% less when they have a leader like that.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're happy. You're
Yeah.
changing brain chemistry. They're happy. They want to be there.
Yeah.
It becomes a more cohesive, close knit group. People don't want to work for somebody who leads through aggressive fear. We see that in the political world and the corporate world. Yep, some people stay because money is their god. As long as I'm making a lot of money, I'll tolerate being mean.
Yeah.
Well, you give away your soul in that case.
Yeah. Well, in this case, it's like standing up to power, even if the power is a person of color, right? Because the problem is that now this gentleman is afraid to stand up, right? Because he's already had the privilege and the power, so if I'm going to just cede all of it because I'm like just playing. It's just the opposite roles. Like it's a very interesting scenario that I'm seeing at least in nonprofit scenarios, and I've seen
Yes,
it
yes.
multiple times. literally 3 or 4 times in the last year where there's this reversal of power because the mission is usually about people of color and bringing them, better
Hmm.
equity in schools,
Hmm.
health, whatever. And so there's this turnaround, and then there's like an oppression and fear-based mentality on the opposite direction where and there is literally no equality, fairness. It's just a bizarre scenario. I'm hoping that we will moderate or reach a point where we understand equality means listening to everyone, not just
Hmm.
people of color. I mean, it's a weird kind of scenario. This has been always such a fun and delight talking to you. We've been talking to Dr. Arthur Ciarmamicoli. I'll figure out how to pronounce words at one point. The Triumph of Diversity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the interaction. Thanks so much.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.